story of a man who conquered more than England's enemies. Afraid to fight the enemies of his country, he fought and won a greater battle.
Hello all, my name is Yasmin, but everybody calls me Yaya, and today I'll be getting into how Western media influences negative stereotypes about Arabs and Muslims. I'll be getting into historical films that go back to stereotyping Arabs as belly dancers and mysterious sheiks, to how the news portrays Arabs today, and what's being done to address this. And I'll be talking about all of this while I do my makeup. According to a report published in 2024, Americans consume about 12 hours and 42 minutes of media per day. And studies show that those who rely solely on the media for their interpretation of Middle Eastern culture often develop more negative attitudes towards the Middle East versus those who have direct interactions with them. Now, how did this happen? Well, a lot of people assume that it's because of 9/11 that the media has been negatively portraying people from the Middle East. However, negative portrayals or stereotypical portrayals of Middle Eastern people and the Middle East itself has been around since the 1920s. For example, The Sheik, a film from 1921, established the exotic desert romance stereotype, which portrayed characters that weren't very real, like the mysterious sheiks and belly dancers. And then there's also The Four Feathers, which was released in 1939, and it reinforces the idea that foreign people like Arabs must be saved and civilized by the white man. Now, to some, these movies are just interpreted as harmless and honest interpretations of the Middle East, and that could be, but suggestive messaging became a lot clearer around the 1950s and 60s when science fiction writers began to show their fear of different cultures through the media. And you can see that specifically in Philip Jose Farmer's book, Riders of the Purple Wave. Now, when people have never been to the Middle East and they consume media like this, it's really no wonder that they are going to have negative stereotypes. But the thing is, it doesn't just stop at stereotypes. In fact, until 1944, American courts would deny citizenship for anyone who they perceived as Muslim. And negative U.S. media coverages increased even further in the U.S. after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. And this eventually normalized policies like the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996. Now, why is this important? Well, the effects of media representation goes beyond just entertainment. Research has actually shown a direct correlation between negative portrayals of Muslims and increased hostilities towards Muslim communities. And this makes sense considering that there are over 250,000 articles that portray Muslims and Arabs in a negative way. And these portrayals were more negative than 84% of other stories published by the same media outlets. And this is even true even when it comes to reporting on violence. Now, many people actually don't know this, but white supremacists and right-wing extremists actually make up for 73% of terrorist attacks since 9/11 that have led to death. And even though that's the case, it's only attacks done by Muslims that receive 357% more press than terrorist attacks done by white supremacists or right-wing extremists. For example, the Orlando nightclub shooting received 1,600 news articles within the first 24 hours of it happening, while reports on non-Muslim attacks received only about 400 on average during the same time frame. So some sources also put it like 15 headlines for non-Muslim attacks and 105 headlines for every Muslim attack. Even though, again, right-wing supremacists make up 73% of domestic terrorist cases, and according to the US government, they are the biggest domestic terrorist threat in the United States. And something that's even more maddening is that when white supremacists do these terrorist attacks, they're often humanized and they're given a backstory, or people say that they have mental health problems. Now, this isn't just in America. In 2019, when 51 people were shot in New Zealand at the Christchurch Mosque, only 12% of news outlets covered the impacts that it had on the victims. Meanwhile, 83% of headlines mentioned the perpetrator's name and often gave a story of where his perspective came from, emphasizing his hateful ideology, which often influences more attacks like the one these news outlets are reporting on. Now, this targeted portrayal of Muslims and Arabs will lead to more discrimination, including hate crimes and other forms of racist attacks. And this directly impacts the health of the Arab and Muslim community. A study from 2023 shows that 67% of Muslims experience anxiety related to negative media coverage of their communities. And clinical studies show that Muslims experiencing media-related discrimination are 3.2 times more likely to develop depressive symptoms, 2.8 times more likely to report anxiety disorders, and 4.5 times more likely to experience social isolation. Studies also show that stress caused by discrimination leads to higher prevalence of diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. And this is not even mentioning the physical attacks that Muslims experience around the world. For example, in the UK, 42% of mosques have experienced hate crimes or attacks over the span of 3 years. And there has been a 56% increase in attacks on Muslims and Arabs over the past year. Now, this is all negative news, but fortunately, there are initiatives to increase media literacy amongst those who don't have it, especially amongst young people, which is great. And there's also a significant amount of popular films and shows that portray Arabs in a more nuanced way. Now, one of the media literacy programs that I mentioned include one from Indiana University, which taught 2,500 students that showed a 45% increase in critical analysis skills. And this also led to a 67% reduction in stereotype acceptance. There are also other initiatives like PBS School News Hour, which is in 150 schools nationwide, and I believe it teaches 3,000 students who have created over 500 balanced news pieces about diverse communities. There are also very popular Arab-led shows that talk about Palestinian Americans, like the show Mo, that's very popular on Netflix, and it was nominated for 3 Emmy Awards, and it actually got a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And there's also the show Rami, which is about an Egyptian American navigating his life in America, which has a 96% average critic rating. And it's actually been featured in over 50 universities' curriculums that study modern Muslim representation. Now, there's also the animated film called Bilal, which is about an Islamic historic figure, and that movie is actually shared in over 200 schools for cultural education. It had an $8.6 million budget, and it was released in 30 countries. So while we do have a long way to go, representation of Muslim and Arab people is increasing in a positive way because it's being done by Muslims and Arabs and people who genuinely want to understand the people from this region, the religion, and things like that. So if you're like me and you feel very strongly about things like this and you do want to see more equality and less hatred, just in general, but especially towards the Muslim and Arab community, there are so many things that you can do. One of them being supporting Arab and Muslim documentaries, films, and other outlets of media. You can join media literacy workshops and encourage other people to do so. And just be active in sharing positive news and positive representations of our community. Now, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know in the comments of any positive representations that you've been seeing of Muslims and Arabs in the media, if I haven't mentioned them already. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to read more about anything that I just spoke about, as always, all sources in the comments.